Hey, you guys, how are you? I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes to get started, as always, just to give people a chance to kind of hop on. I'm going to get my desk shifted in the way I need it to be. And again, as always, if nobody hops on, I will always record this and share it over on my website. I always like to take these first few minutes to kind of share where you can find the webinars, where you can find the resources. Every week, I kind of announce what the webinar is going to be. I'm not going to lie. I usually do that the day of. That's just how I like to roll. And then I also record the webinars, and those are all located over on my website. So you can find those at andymcnair.com/@home-learning. Every webinar that I've done kind of since we've gone into this whole experience of COVID-19 and remote learning is housed in that one spot. So you can access all of the webinars. Tonight's webinar will be there as well. It was fun seeing the people who registered for tonight. And as always, even if you register and you are unable to attend, I will do my best to send those out via email. I kind of haven't been great at that, but I'm working on really making that happen so that you guys have access to the information, even if you weren't able to attend the webinar live. So I'm so excited that you're here. If you will take a second and just introduce yourself in the chat, that would be awesome, or in the comments, just so I kind of know who's here, where you're from. I would really, really appreciate that. It's always really awkward just sitting here talking to my wall. And I'm kind of just getting back in the groove of things. I took a little bit of a break, and so I'm still a little nervous. It's been a while since I've done this, and so getting back in the kind of doing this all the time and being super comfortable, I'm still working on that right now. So I am excited that you guys are here. I'm looking forward to talking about really being intentional about creating a collaborative culture. I think that's something that's so important right now as we are in this really weird place of having some of our learners at home and some of our learners in the classroom. It's a little bit difficult, I would imagine, for sure. And thinking through what can that look like? How do we do this in a way that makes sense and can build a culture that really cultivates collaboration, right? Gives them that opportunity to collaborate and learn from each other. And we want to be intentional about that. So that's what tonight's webinar is all about, kind of building that collaborative culture, making that happen, and really practical ways to do so. So as we kind of jump in, I'm going to share 4 key things. And one of the new things that I'm doing with the webinars is they may not always last an hour. Sometimes they might, tonight probably won't. Sometimes they'll be 30 minutes. So I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible, but I want to make sure that I share everything that I had on my list, because I think this is such an important conversation right now. You know, the collaborative conversation and the equity conversation are very similar. And as I was kind of thinking about and planning for this evening's webinar, I kind of realized that, like, you know, there's a lot of things that I would say about equity I would say the same thing about giving them the opportunity to collaborate, because that opportunity to collaborate is something that every learner deserves, whether they are learning at home or they're learning in the classroom. So we want to make sure that we provide that opportunity. And so that's what I want to talk about tonight. What does it look like to provide that opportunity for our learners? All right, so let's just jump right in. What does it look like to really collaborate? How do we do that? And how do we give our kids that opportunity? I think, first of all, one of the things that we have to say is that in order to collaborate, right, in order to have conversations around some of the things that are happening in the classroom, some of the things that are going on, is that we have to give everyone the same access to instructional support. So in other words, if we are teaching something or we are sharing something with our learners, it doesn't matter whether they are at home or they're in class, they all deserve that access to instructional support. Now, this is where it starts to look a lot like equity, right? But stay with me here, because what I'm saying is that in order to be given that opportunity to collaborate with kids who are in the classroom, they have to have access to some of the same things that those kids in the classroom have access to. So let me give you some examples, some practical things that you can do right now. And I actually shared these, I think, in the equity webinar as well, but I think they are worth repeating. So first of all, the first thing that I would do is take a 360 image of your classroom and put that in your LMS, or put it in a place that your students who are learning at home can access that. Where can they go and actually see, hey, what does the classroom look like? What is it? Maybe even do a video, right? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? because even though they're learning from home, being given that opportunity to see what that learning setting is like is going to be important. So take a 360 image or a video of your classroom and put it in your LMS for your students at home to access. That is a really great idea. If I do say so myself. I don't know why I said that, but you guys know what I mean. It's a great way to give your kids kind of that opportunity to see, hey, this is what learning looks like in the classroom. I think another thing that we need to do is give them access to simple things like anchor charts, right? If we have anchor charts hanging up in our classroom, we need to take pictures of those and they need to be able to access that. I would just have a place in your LMS every week that you provide the instructional support that will be needed for that week. So in other words, maybe provide the pictures of the anchor charts that might come in handy. Because if I'm a student sitting in the classroom, I have access to those. I can look up and I can see it. If I'm at home, unless you give me access to that, I don't. And so we want to make sure that we are intentional about that. Finally, the last thing that I think is not a bad idea is to give your kids access to things like mini lessons, right? The little things that you teach in the classroom when you're with your students. So those opportunities that you have to walk around and say, hey, remember this connects to this, or remember this is what this looks like. Record short little mini lessons for those kids at home and drop those again into the LMS each week. That's your learning management system, right? Whether that's Google Classroom or Schoology or Canvas or Seesaw, whatever that is, have a place in there each week where those kids who are learning at home have access to anchor charts, mini lessons from you, and also virtual manipulatives. So I think about elementary students and maybe even middle school and high school kids. There are things that kids in the classroom are going to have access to. And so when they're collaborating and they're talking about those things, you don't want those at-home learners to think, well, gosh, I didn't have access to that. I don't even know what they're talking about. So if you have a manipulative in your classroom or something that your students are using, so maybe it's base 10 blocks or, lots of different things that they have, maybe it's the geometry things, try to find a virtual version of that or a digital version of that you can share with your students who are learning at home so that, again, when they are collaborating, they've had access to the same things. What you don't want to happen is for them to be collaborating and for a kid to say, and I know this would be rare, but let's say a kid says, oh my gosh, that one chart really helped me understand that. And a kid at home to go, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't even have access to that. We want to make sure that those kids at home, when they're going to be given that opportunity to collaborate, that they've had access to the same instructional support as those kids who are sitting in the classroom. I think that's priority number one. All right, now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let's really dive into what real collaboration can look like. Because I think that it's one of the things that I hear teachers saying a lot that they're struggling with, that it requires a lot of time and a lot of intentionality, and that is so true. But there are some simple ways that we can make this happen, and I'm a big fan of front-loading things, right? Getting things in place that you're going to use all year long, but that give your kids an opportunity to collaborate and learn together. So I'm going to talk really quickly about amplifying every learner's voice. And I know I talk about Flipgrid all the time, but it's not a secret. I'm a huge fan of Flipgrid, the work that they do, and how beneficial it is not only in the classroom, but for those at-home learners as well. And the great thing about Flipgrid is that it doesn't matter where they are. They can record and they can have conversations back and forth. So they can give each other feedback. You can give them private feedback or public feedback. Just that opportunity to collaborate with their teacher as well as their peers is awesome and so important right now, because if I'm learning at home and I don't have access to everyone else in the classroom, that is a disservice, right? That's not okay. We have to find ways to make that happen. And Flipgrid is hands down my favorite way to do that. So let's talk just a second about some things that you could front load, have in place that you could then use all year, and your kids would have the opportunity to kind of share their voice, share their thoughts on one particular grid. So first of all, if you haven't seen Flipgrid, it's an opportunity for your students to share their thoughts, share their reflections, share their ideas, whatever it is on through video, right? So you post a topic and you post a topic resource, whether that be a video from you, a picture, a GIF, whatever you want it to be. You post that, and then there's also a question or something for them to respond to, and then they record their responses. So I'm going to show you really quickly a grid that I think, or a topic that I think every teacher, educator should have in their classroom and every learner should have access to. And it's this topic of reflection, right? Every time I learn something, I should be given the opportunity to reflect on that and to think through, hey, what does this look like? What does this mean for me? First of all, I promise you, if you are not giving your kids an opportunity to reflect on their learning, it's really hard for it to be meaningful, right? They have to make a connection to it. You guys are competing with things we've never had to compete with before. It might be the dog at the back door, the trampoline that's outside. Maybe it is TikTok or video games. Whatever it is, we're competing with things we've never had to compete with before. So giving our learners an opportunity to actually connect to the learning is really, really important right now. So let me show you what this looks like. You guys can see that I have kind of written directions for them. So I said, please take time to reflect on what you've learned in class today. You may scan the code or click the link to be directed to a reflection question or reflect on your own. Please remember that I don't need you to tell me what we did in class today. I was here. So this is just that opportunity to remind them there is a difference between remembering and reflection. And so I love this QR code from Tony Vincent. If you haven't seen this, I talk about it all the time because it's kind of my favorite. It's just an opportunity for you to be intentional about reflection without having to do a lot of work, right? Tony's already done it for you. So this reflection QR code, unbelievable, so powerful. And you can find this on Tony's blog. And I'll actually post a link to that in the comments below when we're done with this webinar. But what I did was I just saved that QR code and I used it as the topic resource in my Flipgrid topic. So I created a reflection group. I created, I think I called it today's takeaways topic. And then I just put the QR code as the topic resource, and I put the link to Tony's website, which is just this tonyv.me/reflect. So if they don't have a phone or they can't scan this, they can click here as well. Now, every time they do this, and I'm not sure I have the link right. No, let me put it in here really quickly. Actually, I don't know if you guys can see that once I leave the screen. So I'm going to stay here. But when they click here, it'll take them straight to that question. But as I'm talking, if you want to scan that QR code, feel free to do that just so you can see what this looks like. But just every day, this is something they could do every day. You would never have to change this topic. You could just make copies of it. You could duplicate it and use it over and over and over again so that every day they are reflecting. And maybe your requirement is you have to reflect on your learning today, and then you have to go comment or give feedback, meaningful feedback on somebody else's reflection, right? So now you're starting to build that collaboration, whether I'm at home or I'm in class. It doesn't matter. It's not like if I'm in class, I'm only going to go comment on somebody who's in class. I have access to everyone's video. So it starts to build that classroom culture of, even though we're learning in different places, we are able to interact and kind of learn together. So hopefully this makes sense. I'm going to post not only the link to Tony's blog post, but I wrote a blog post about how to create a reflection grid, just step by step how to do it. So I will share that in the comments as well, something you'll definitely want to check out. So on Flipgrid, creating a today's takeaway or today's takeaways topic, and just duplicating that, right? Front load it, build it, and be done with it. One of the things that we're going to have to do this year is be consistent. It's okay for something to look the same all year long. And then just tell your kids, hey, every day there has to be a reflection from you. I have to see what the learning meant for you. And then I want you to also interact with somebody else. So after you reflect, go ahead and share your comment on someone else's reflection as well. So hopefully that makes sense. I think Flipgrid is just so great about that. I do want to show you one other thing really quickly before I move on. And that is that if you have not seen this, and I've shared it before, but if you've not seen this, let's say you have a struggling reader in your classroom. They can click on the immersive reader in Flipgrid, which is so cool, and it will read the instructions that you've typed out loud to them.
Example, please take time to reflect on what you learned in class today.
That I always say, I don't care who you are, that is awesome, right? It gives your kids an opportunity to really have access, and not just access, but meaningful access that helps them learn in a way that makes sense to them. So then they can also go over here, and if you've seen this, it's just powerful, right? They can increase the spacing of the words. They can identify the parts of speech, break the words into syllables. If I'm an English language learner, I can say that I need a picture dictionary. I can translate by word or by document into my language. Let's say I don't know what this word is. It pops up a question mark. So that picture dictionary can be really powerful as well. So very, very cool. One of the many, many benefits of using Flipgrid is that access to immersive reader. All right, so I am going to get out of that. Another thing that I think you could do in Flipgrid is to create a help grid, right? And just have a topic or a group that is created for your students to ask questions, and then give them permission to respond to each other, right? So let's say a student is really struggling with a particular tool that you guys are using, or how to do a specific math problem. They could go on to the help grid and they could post their questions. And then ask your students, hey, if you have free time, or if you really understand something really well, hop on our help grid and see if anybody needs support or help. And you guys give help to each other, right? I'll support as much as I can as the teacher. I'll hop on and respond to those as well. But letting them help each other, and I'm not talking about peer-to-peer tutoring, right? I'm talking about just a simple question about either a tool or, hey, how do you do this one thing? Just a quick response, and then giving them that opportunity to do that. In Flipgrid, when your students are recording their responses, they can include a whiteboard. So they can do half of their screen as a whiteboard and half of their screen as their face. So that means they can actually walk somebody through, hey, here's how you do this. Here's what that should look like. Again, that just builds that opportunity to kind of say, we're all in this together. And it's not just about Mrs. McNair answering all the questions, but let's come together as a class and see how we can support each other. And that starts to build that culture of collaboration, that willingness to invest in each other, really, which is very, very cool, and will help those kids who are learning from home feel like they are a part of this family, or feel like they're a part of this bigger picture, if that makes sense. Okay, so definitely Flipgrid, whether it's a reflection grid or it is a help grid that you create. I think both are really powerful ways to give your students those opportunities to connect and learn from each other. Now, that being said, remember, you could build those grids now and use them all year long. So a big time saver for you as well. All right, the next one's kind of a big one. I'm just going to say this out loud. I say it all the time, but I still see this happening often. Design one learning experience. You should not be doing one thing for your in-class learners and doing something different for your at-home learners. First of all, that brings the equity conversation back in, right? If what you're doing in class is different than what those students are doing at home, I think you have to really think about the justification behind that. Like, why would the learners at home either have more work or less work than those who are sitting in the classroom, right? That should not be happening. You should design one learning experience, right? Ask yourself, what I've done, is it going to leave an impression on my learners? And if it is, go for it. But think about, I'm going to deliver the learning in the same way, probably through your LMS, whether that's Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, or Seesaw, or Edmodo, whatever that is that you guys are using. That was a blast from the past, right? But whatever you guys are using, really thinking through, hey, what is this experience look like? How do I kind of set it up so that my kids in class can go through this, my kids at home can go through this, but it's the facilitation of the learning that will look different, right? I'm either going to facilitate it in person or I'm going to facilitate it virtually for those kids who are learning at home. And I think that that is just something we have to continue to say and have that conversation of why would the learning at home look different than the learning in the classroom? That's double work for you, the teacher. And it's really, I think, a hard conversation to have if you had a parent come up and say, hey, parents talk, right? Hey, why is my kid having to do more than one assignment for this one deal when I know the in-class learners only did this once, or something like that, whatever that looks like or whatever that is. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe your kids in class have more than the at-home learners. There's no reason for that to be the case. I think instead we have to really be intentional for your sake, for the sake of the educators, that we're not kind of creating this scenario where we are doing double work. But instead, we're thinking about, we are going to design one learning experience. Everyone's going to have access, and I'm going to facilitate that learning differently based on where the students are, right? Okay, so a really cool way that you can make that happen. I've been passionate about that now for a while. Some of you are like, we know you say it every week, but I just think it's important. So you can find some information on that and how I think you can really design that experience that is appropriate for in-class and at-home learners over at andymcnair.com/planner. And I actually have a virtual planner that you can access totally free over there on that website. So andymcnair.com/planner talks about really designing a meaningful learning experience. There's a framework, so I call it the DMLE framework, and it talks about how to engage your learners, get to that willingness to invest, design an experience that they're excited about, and then empower them to take that learning beyond the learning experience or beyond the classroom to do something with it. And then even taking it a step further and thinking about, hey, what are we going to do about our kids who struggle? Because we know there's going to be kids at home who struggle, and we know there's going to be kids in class who struggle. What are those kids going to have access to? Thinking about our gifted learners or our kids who are high achievers. We know we're going to have those kids, whether they are at home or in class. Well, how am I going to provide that enrichment for them? And again, that is an opportunity to collaborate, right? Everyone who gets the enrichment opportunity, you might provide them an opportunity to collaborate on that experience. Your kids who are struggling, right? Think about what we would do in a regular situation. If we weren't in these circumstances, those kids would kind of be together and be able to offer each other support. So how can we continue to give that opportunity for them to support each other and learn together and have these conversations, even though things look a little bit different, right? So design one learning experience. You can find really kind of a solution that I think exists for that over at andymcnair.com/planner. But it really is just about intentionality and saying out loud, I'm not going to design two different experiences. I've got to do this in a way that is equitable, that makes sense, and that gives every learner access to the same content, to the same resources, to the same ideas. So definitely something to think through. Finally is being intentional about collaboration, right? We just have to really think about every day as we're designing, or every week as we're designing these experiences. Hey, what does collaboration really look like for me? What do I think that means for my students? And how can I give them opportunities to do that? Like we talked about, you could do a Flipgrid topic every single day, which is just constantly giving them that opportunity to practice life-ready skills as well as make connection to the content. It's a win-win, right? And so thinking through, hey, doing something like that gives them the opportunity to not only collaborate, it gives them the opportunity to learn how to accept feedback, how to give feedback. It provides them the opportunity to practice communication, right? Even though it's with a computer, still those skills have to be there, right? Eye contact, learning how to use those nonverbal cues, and really listening to someone else as they're sharing, even if it is on the other side of a screen. Also, that opportunity to reflect. That's a life ready skill. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity. I always say reflection and kindness should be included there as well. But those are life ready skills that we know that they need, and that creating those things that they do every day, is just giving them an opportunity to practice that. A couple of other ways that I think you could be intentional about collaboration is using some really easy tools like Kahoot, right? Everybody knows about Kahoot. You don't have to just play Kahoot with your kids who are in class. Kahoot can be accessed from anywhere. So regardless of where they are, when you play the game, you could tell them, hey, you guys hop on at this time and we're going to be playing a Kahoot. And that gives them the opportunity to play that game with the learners who are in class, so they still feel like they're a part of it. Competition is actually one of the 8 C's of engagement. So doing something like a Kahoot at the beginning of a learning experience is a cool way to get to that willingness to invest, and a great way for everyone to feel like we're kind of all in this together. If you didn't know this, when you create a Kahoot, they don't have to do it all together, right? You can also choose that they work on it independently. So they're still kind of competing. They're still all doing it. They're all working on the same Kahoot. They can all, they're all getting the same questions, but they can work on it on their own time. So as we think about asynchronous learning and kids logging into the LMS at different times and having access to that, you could always use Kahoot that way, right? To do it as an independent kind of challenge where they have, and I think that's what it's actually called, is a challenge. And that way they work on it on their time, but it's still a collaborative effort. They still all have access to that same Kahoot, still that opportunity to kind of collaborate and learn together. Another tool that I kind of love, and I've used this in a lot of my professional learning this summer, is Mentimeter. So Mentimeter.com is, I'm going to put the link up here for you guys to see, is a really cool resource, and it's free. And I've used this oftentimes in my professional learning to either ask a question, right? You can ask an open-ended question and you can see everyone's responses pop up. Or I've done word clouds before, right? Tell me 3 things that you would use to describe gifted learners, and everybody's words start popping up. So what a great way to kind of build that collaboration for them all to be on. And even your kids who are not in the classroom, their responses can still be seen with those kids who are in the classroom. So you're building that kind of opportunity for, hey, we may not all be in the same space, but that doesn't mean we can't collaborate. And it doesn't mean we can't come together and share our responses and share our ideas. And you want to make sure that those kids who are learning from home, we want to make sure they know that their voices have value, that we want to hear them, we want to see them, we want them to be a part of our classroom culture. And so doing something like that, and just telling your kids, hey, if you could hop on at this time, I'm going to send you the link, and putting that in your LMS, or letting them put theirs in a little bit earlier, whatever, provides that opportunity for, again, them to see that you are willing to do something different so that their voice is heard and so that they feel like they are a part of the classroom culture. And I just think that that is so important right now. I worry so much about those kids. You know, really, we're worried about all of them, right? But I mean, when we think about those kids who are learning from home, it's so important that we give them those opportunities to interact and to have access to their peers in a way that is meaningful, and also in a way that is manageable for us, right? I say that all the time. It has to be manageable for you, the teacher, but it also has to be really meaningful for our learners. And I think without collaboration, things can tend to not be meaningful, right? And if you think about a learner who is just logging into an LMS every day, checking off boxes, I did this, I did this, I did this, that is probably not going to result in the results that we're looking for, right? It's not going to end well. But if we can instead really think about, hey, how do I design this experience in a way where I at least provide one opportunity for everyone to feel connected, right? For everyone's voice to be heard. And whether that's Flipgrid, Mentimeter, Kahoot, whatever that is, however you do that, doesn't matter. It's just about being intentional about doing so. It's that intentionality, I think, that can make such a difference in what goes on right now in every classroom for every learner. So as we kind of wrap up, I want to say that I don't want to suggest by any stretch of the imagination that any of these things are easy. And I also don't want to suggest that I have all of the solutions. You know, we're all still kind of learning this as we go. I think it's just really about reflecting on the remote learning experience, what happened in the spring, and thinking about what we've always known to be best practice, what we've always known that our kids need, and coming up with practical solutions to continue to make some of those things happen. And so I think collaboration really fits in there, right? It really is thinking about, you know what, during the spring, there were kids who were completely disconnected. They had no access to their teacher, and that's definitely not your fault. A lot of times that was just a lack of being able to be connected. But they had no access to their teacher. They had no access to their peers. And then they, you know, we had those students who just, we never heard from. We had no idea what happened to them. And so now I think that tells us, okay, so that collaboration, that connection piece is something now that we have to be really, really intentional about, and we have to make it happen for our learners. So I hope that that makes sense. I hope those are some practical ideas that you can take and you can use. I'm going to drop some of those links in the comments below. I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys and the work that you're doing. My gosh, I know that it's not easy. I know that there are going to be so many bumps in the road and so many obstacles that it seems like we have to overcome. But in the end, if we will have these hard conversations and we will say the things that need to be said out loud, I think we're going to be able to look back, as I always say, at this obstacle course and realize that we're better and we're stronger for it. So I just absolutely love the Meaningful Mess community. I'm so thankful for you guys and the work that you do now and the work that we'll continue to do moving forward. But I hope that this makes some small difference and helps you in some small way. And I hope that this week you are able to find meaning in your mess. If you need anything at all, please reach out. You guys get some rest, and I'll talk to you soon.